2024 was the best year ever for the FPO division, with the most dominant players setting new records to several first-time winners and many tournament endings that had us on the edge of our seat. Join me as we recap the 2024 Disc Golf Pro Tour FPO season. Hey everyone, it's Hale back with the FPO recap, and boy was I excited to make this video. As I rewatched some of these tournaments, there were so many moments that I had to include, even at the risk of making this a super long video. But let me tell you, it was so worth it reliving all of these tournaments. So let's just jump right into the recap. The 2024 season saw many schedule and tournament changes. The first one being that we would no longer play the Las Vegas Challenge as our kickoff event, but instead we would introduce the Chess.com Invitational in Florida at the Paul Macbeth redesigned Olympus course. Now, as always, the tour starts the season with the All-Star event, which honestly, it's just kind of the season warm-up with little meaning. I'm not going to cover the results here, but I will say it gave us our first look at how the Olympus course would play. And boy, was this course much tougher than the open fairways out at Wild Horse. With the All-Star event in the books, it was time to kick off the first Elite Series event. The Chess.com Invitational would start with some amazing play by two up-and-comers, Holland Hanley and Ella Hansen. Both were household names by now, but both still had yet to get their first DGPT Elite Series win. Holland and Ella would be tied after 2 rounds at 10 under, with Missy Gannon at 9 under and Evelina Salonen at 8 under. Unfortunately, the trends we saw in 2023 bled over into this year as once again, Holland and Ella struggled to maintain their lead in the final round. Meanwhile, Missy Gannon and Evelina Salonen battled back and forth to be the new frontrunner. Evelina played the back half of the course strong, including some clutch putting, something that plagued her in the past few seasons. This allowed her to build a sizable gap in the final hole, and she was able to end her winning drought with very little drama.
Your champion at the Chess.com Invitational, Evelina Salonen.
And with Evelina's putter looking stronger than ever, this seemed like a statement to the rest of the FPO field that Evelina was the one to look out for in 2024. There is one small caveat to this first win, and that is that Kristin Tattar was not in attendance for the first event. She was still in Europe at the time, but she did return for the next event, Waco, and she would make her presence known immediately. Now, Waco has been a stop on the tour for years now, and it is typically played on the Brazos East course. This year, a second course was added to the event, Lake Waco, which contrasted Brazos East very well, with Brazos being more wooded and technical, and Lake Waco being wide open with lots of OB. Owen Scoggins got the hot round on day 1, while Ella Hansen took advantage of her distance by shooting a magnificent 8 under in the second round at Lake Waco. This put her right in the lead, 2 strokes over Owen. Meanwhile, Kristin Tattar hung near the top, 6 strokes back, ready to make her move. And that's exactly what she did in round 3. Ella once again had some late tournament struggles, erasing her lead on moving day. She would lose 11 strokes to Kristin, putting herself 5 back of Kristin on Championship Sunday. This is all the space that Tattar needed, and she was able to go 4 under to secure a 7-stroke win over Owen Scoggins to get her first win of the 2024 season. Many were already thinking that this was going to be the beginning of another blowout season by Kristin. Well, Owen Scoggins was quick to respond. After finishing runner-up at Waco, she was ready to make her mark on the season. And that's exactly what she would do at the Open at Austin. Round 1, Owen Scoggins would shoot 3 under, leaving her tied for 5th. But round 2, something clicked and Owen was unstoppable. She would shoot an impressive 13 under, shattering the course record. Honestly, this was one of the best FPO putting rounds I have ever seen. It didn't matter where she was on the course, whether she was 20 feet away or 60 feet away, you were confident that she was going to make the putt. Round 3 was almost equally as impressive. In wet weather conditions, she was still able to shoot a blazing 10 under round. Ultimately, she would win with an 11-stroke victory over the field. Even Kristin Tattar, who shot a pretty good 1,000 rated event, was not even a threat to Owen. This would be Owen Scoggins' second Elite Series win and would be one of the most impressive FPO performances of all time. This was great timing for Owen as we were heading into the first major of the season, and she had all the confidence in the world. The U.S. Women's Disc Golf Championship was held in Austin at Sprinkle Valley Disc Golf Course. Although visually the course was a bit on the ugly side, the technical disc golf that it required provided some high-level entertainment. All eyes were on Kristen Tatar, who swept the majors back in 2023. Would she keep the streak going? Well, after round 1, Kristen was just 4 back of leader Missy Gannon. This was not unusual for Kristen to be not in the lead after round 1, as she would usually start to make her run toward the middle of the tournament. This time it was a different story. On the chase card, Kristen would struggle shooting a 3 over in round 2. This would put her tied for 8th, 8 back of the lead. Meanwhile, Missy Gannon continued to shoot well and hold on to the lead. Evelina Salonen would have a solid first half of the tournament and just be 3 strokes back. In round 3, Missy and Evelina kept their strong play, with Missy shooting 6 under and Evelina shooting 7 under, with 2 strokes separating the two in the final round. Now, many expected Kristen Tatar to make a charge and put herself back in contention for the final round, but instead, she only shot a 3 under, leaving her 11 back of the lead, virtually ending her majors winning streak. With all the attention now on Missy Gannon and her quest for her first major title, the question was, could she hold off Evelina? The final day was a struggle for everyone. It really turned out to be a battle of who can stay mentally tough and survive the course. Salonen started her round out with a double bogey, which she was never really able to battle back from. Even with Missy shooting 2 over in the front 9, Evelina was never able to capitalize on opportunities to birdie. Holyn Handley, who came into the round 8 strokes back, also struggled and was unable to apply any pressure to the leaders. In the end, Missy Gannon was able to limp across the finish line comfortably with a 5-stroke advantage, winning her first career major title. Evelina would shoot a 5 over but still hang on to second. Valerie Mondahano had a great tournament, shooting 2 under on the final day to get a podium finish. Finally, although Kristen Tatar shot 1 over in the final round, she was able to take advantage of other players' struggles and move up to 6th place. Kristen and the field would have to regroup quick, as in just 1 week they would be back in Houston for the Texas States Championships. At Texas States, Owen Scoggins would take the early lead in round 1, shooting 11 under. Annika Sten would be right behind her at 10 under, and Holyn Handley would be in the mix at 9 under. In round 2, Owen Scoggins and Annika would shoot hot, eventually being tied at 20 under after moving day. Unfortunately, Holyn was unable to keep up and fell off the lead card. Kristen Tatar was finally able to put it together, shooting 12 under to get within 3 of the leaders. On the final day, Annika, although tied for the lead, was not really the favorite coming into the event. However, through the pressure of going for her first elite win, she was able to stay out in front. Owen would start off slow and lose ground during the middle of the round. But instead, Kristen Tatar applied heavy pressure, as you would expect from the world number 1, who shot 11 under through 16 holes. Annika was not backing down though, shooting 9 under in that same stretch. With only a 1-shot lead, Annika had to make sure she stuck the tough island green on 18 to get her win. And by the skin of her teeth, Annika was able to put her drive on the green, leaving it up to Kristen Tatar. Kristen's drive looked good right out of the hand, but unfortunately she would have way too much speed and find the OB. This allowed Annika to lay up and take her first Elite Series victory. Annika Sten has been a strong European player for a while now, so this wasn't a surprise to see her get a well-deserved victory at the highest level. Kristen Tatar would suffer another disappointing finish, and what we thought was going to be another dominating year for her turned into questions on if the field had finally caught up. As the ladies left Texas and headed to Jonesboro, Kristen was looking to change the narrative. This time she was able to start strong, shooting 10 under, immediately distancing herself from the field. Going into round 2, she would have a 6-stroke lead, and she would follow it up with an impressive 8 under second round. She would eventually finish 22 under overall to win by 9 strokes over Holyn Handley. This was the Kristen Tatar we were used to from last year. Kristen wasn't done there. At Music City Open, she would shoot 3 under in round 1, being 4 behind leader Holyn Handley. Now, Holyn had been near the top nearly every event this season, but has been unable to play strong in the final round. Holyn would get another chance, as her and Kristen would go into the last day tied for the lead, 8 strokes clear of third. On the final day, with the pressure on Holyn to compete with Kristen, it was surprisingly Kristen who looked shaky early, taking 2 bogeys in the first 3 holes, giving Holyn the early lead. But immediately, Kristen was able to turn it around, getting 5 birdies in the next 6. Holland had issues scoring, and quickly Kristen was able to get some distance out in front. And from there, she was able to cruise into a 4-point victory, securing her 3rd win of the season. By now, the narrative had once again shifted back to how unstoppable Kristen was. In fact, at this time, she was 999 rated and looking to become the first female to reach 1,000 rated. She would have her eyes on the next event, PDGA Major number 2 for the FPO field, Champions Cup. Now, Champions Cup was in a different venue this year after the unfortunate beetle infestation at WR Jackson. This year, it would be at the challenging, wooded Northwood Black in Morton, Illinois. After round 1, most of the big names were at or near the top of the leaderboard. Round 2 would be affected by a 5-hour weather delay midway through the round. Going into that delay, there was a 7-way tie for the lead. Coming out of that delay, Valerie Mondahano, who had a strong run at the last major, would take charge, commanding a 4-stroke advantage over second. Late in the round, however, she would run into some trouble, giving up ground to Kristen Tatar, who would close out her round with a birdie and an eagle. Rachel Turton from Great Britain was also able to close the gap as well, tying the lead. Now, if you are a diehard follower of the Pro Tour, Rachel Turton's name is probably not unfamiliar to you, as she has seen great success on the European scene, but this was really her first time performing big here in the United States. So it wasn't surprising, but really good to see her at the top. Those 3 ladies would be tied for the lead starting round 3. Right behind them was Silva Saarinen and Evelina Salonen waiting to make their move. Silva, Evelina, Tatar, and Turton would play well to kick off the round. Then it was Evelina who started to make some separation, as she would get 6 birdies in a row on one of the toughest stretches on the course, 9 through 14. Tatar, who at one point was more than 6 back of Evelina, was able to finish birdie eagle and close the gap to within 2 of Evelina heading into the final day. Owen Scoggins and Rachel Turton would round out your lead card, 5 back of the leaders. The final round would be another tough round for the leaders as tensions were high. Evelina would go 2 over in the front 9, which you would think Kristen Tatar would have taken full advantage of, but she had even more struggles as she would go 4 over herself through the same stretch. Rachel Turton and Owen Scoggins were also unable to make a move, both going 1 over. This brought Silva Saarinen and Henna Blomroos into the mix. Silva would climb her way into second place, just 1 back of Evelina, and Henna would eventually get 3 back. Owen Scoggins started to find her groove late and would be within 2 of the lead. The final holes were tense, with Evelina struggling to birdie. Silva had a window of opportunity on 17 and 18, but would be unable to make up ground, finishing 2 back of Evelina. Henna would score an incredible eagle on hole 18 and would be just 1 back of the lead. They would have to wait anxiously to see how Evelina would play the final hole. This was a hole, surprisingly, that Evelina had struggles with in the previous rounds. She would again hit a tree and kick off the fairway. However, she was fortunate this time because she had a lane to get back out into the fairway. With Owen still 2 strokes back and not really in position to eagle, Evelina could throw 2 layup shots and take the win. And that's exactly what she did, getting her 2nd career major at Champions Cup. Henna would get her best finish of the season at Champions Cup, and most notably, she was able to get an eagle on hole 18 all 4 rounds. Owen Scoggins would get another podium at a major, sharing 2nd with Henna. Silva would get a very strong 4th place finish. Kristen Tatar, although she would be very disappointed in her play on the final round, would have another top 5 at a major, and Rachel Turton would head back to Great Britain with her best finish ever at a PDGA major, tying for 5th. Kristen would head back to Europe to miss DDO and OTB Open, but she was expected to come back for the rest of the tour. However, Kristen would encounter a freak accident and break 2 of her ribs, sidelining her all the way until European Open. With the devastation of having to miss multiple tour events, she was at least able to get some good news to lift her spirits. The May PDGA ratings update was announced, and Kristen Tatar would officially become the first woman to reach 1,000 rated. In an interview, she did mention this was one of her goals this season. Although she didn't seem to be crushing the field like she did in 2023, with this rating, she was able to prove that she is still at the top of her game. Now, not only was Kristen unable to attend the Dynamic Disc Open, but also many European players like Evelina Salonen, Henna Blomroos, and Silva Saarinen headed back home to get ready for the European DGPT season. This would open the door for other players to get some limelight. One of those being Haley King, last year's DDO champion. Haley would be tied with Missy Gannon and Lisa Fakis for the lead after 2 rounds. The final round would be epic, with multiple lead changes between the 3 ladies. Lisa Fakis would take a triple bogey on hole 9, losing a bit of ground, but would eventually come back and tie it on 16 by going for the par play, taking advantage of Missy and Haley, who were unable to stick the island. And you got to take a look at how close this shot was from staying on the island for Haley King. This was wild.
And it does. Oh, it doesn't! Oh my god!
So there was a 3, wait. What I had forgot to mention so far was that rookie Emily Weatherman was having a phenomenal day on the chase card, and she too would claw her way up to tie for the lead. On hole 18, Emily would throw what looked to be a solid tee shot, but she would barely, and I mean barely, go across the OB line. In fact, when they showed a close-up of her disc on live coverage, I thought there was an argument to be made that she was in bounds. Emily tried to plead her case, but to her frustration, her card would say that she was out of bounds, and unfortunately this would end her run. So now with a 3-way tie going into 17, Haley King would take advantage of a great approach and score a birdie. Missy would get the par, and Lisa would bogey. Haley King looked to be in a good position going into the redesign hole 18. Missy's drive would land in a slightly cut off position, which would really hinder her chances to get a birdie. Missy would have to throw first, and she would make it onto the island, but would have a long putt to get the birdie. Haley was in the open fairway and had the option to lay up to the edge of the water and then have a shorter approach across for the easy par, but instead, knowing how dangerous of a putter Missy Gannon is, she went for the green, and this would be a crucial mistake as she would throw short and into the water. Luckily, she was able to put her approach from the OB line right next to the basket and tap in a bogey. Missy was unable to make birdie, so we would head into a playoff. Now, DDO would be the first DGPT event to introduce an aggregate playoff instead of the usual sudden death format. So they would have to play holes 16, 17, and 18, and whoever was in the lead at the end of the sequence would win. If tied, they would then go into a sudden death. On 16, Missy Gannon would barely make the island, while Haley King would throw a near ace. Missy had a long death putt that she could have laid up and take a safe par, but she went for it and canned it in typical Missy Gannon fashion. This would keep them tied going into 17. This is where ultimately the tournament was decided, as Haley would kick a tree early on her tee shot, while Missy Gannon was in position to score. Missy would eventually card the birdie, and Haley would go on to get a bogey. That meant that Missy Gannon could play super safe on 18, which she did, securing her win at the Dynamic Disc Open.
2024 Dynamic Disc Open FPO champion, Missy Gannon!
Now it was off to the West Coast for the OTB Open in Stockton, California. OTB would see a new batch of contenders as Ella Hansen and Holland Hanley saw themselves in a familiar position as they were both tied for the lead at 20 under in the final round. Kat Murch would be in third, but at a distant 13 under. So we knew there was no way Ella or Holland weren't going to win their first DGPT Elite Series event here, right? Well, early on, Ella Hansen looked to be the most comfortable with a 4 under effort through the front 9. Holland would not be able to keep up as she was even through the front 9. And to me, it just seemed like Ella finally had the breathing room she needed on hole 10 when she would par and Holland would take a double bogey. From then on, Ella could relax, play loose, and enjoy the moment. She would eventually go on to take home the trophy, staying 7 clear of the field, and it was so exciting to see Ella Hansen getting her first ever DGPT Elite Series win after being so close in the past and seeing so many heartbreaking losses. Kat Murch had a solid day and was actually able to surpass Holland and steal second place. Holland would once again suffer a nightmare final round and a heartbreaking defeat, but with all of these opportunities that she had, it only felt like a matter of time for her to get that win. Now, for the Portland Open, we would once again get a list of new contenders. This time, Owen Scoggin started hot, going 13 under after 2 rounds, which was a bit surprising seeing how long the course was. Then we had Sophia Donica, who also shot 13 under through the first 2 rounds. This newcomer would not go away quietly, as she would remain on the lead card going into the 4th and final round at 16 under overall. Owen would stay a stroke above Sophia at 17 under. Kat Murch would have a stellar moving day going 7 under to tie up Owen, but it was Paige Pierce who would take the outright lead at 19 under, who would provide the comeback story we had all been waiting for. Pierce, who had a devastating ankle injury before last year's European Open, would be out of disc golf for months, many wondering if she would ever go back to playing competitive disc golf ever again. Well, on the final day, shades of the old Paige Pierce were evident. Once in the lead, she never looked back, going 6 under through 9. No one was able to challenge her, and Paige Pierce was able to capture an emotional victory.
Time. Portland Open champion, Paige Pierce!
Holyn Handley, who was on the chase card, would jump up to second after an impressive 11 under final day round. And Sophia was able to get her first career Elite Series podium, putting her name on the map. After Portland, the tour went to Milo for the Beaver State Fling, and we had an amazing one-on-one battle between Holyn Handley and Owen Scoggins. Tied in the final round, Owen Scoggins would go 3 under to start and would jump out in front, but would quickly drop back after scoring a triple bogey on hole 4. Holyn would start 2 for 3, but then go silent through the rest of the front 9. This allowed Owen Scoggins to battle her way back and tie the lead heading into the back 9. Owen would then hit another hot streak, carding birdies on 11, 12, and 13, while Holyn Handley continued to par. With Owen now up 3 strokes, it looked like she was going to grab another win, and Holyn would have to suffer another disappointing finish. But Holyn decided enough was enough. She was able to get birdies on 15 and 16, gaining 1 stroke back, and then on hole 17, Owen would find trouble on the par 5 when she overturned her forehand approach directly into the ground, and it cut rolled into the OB. She would go on to make a big putt to minimize the damage to just a single bogey. Holyn, on the other hand, would hit a clutch putt herself, scoring the birdie and tying things up for the final hole. Both ladies would try to finish hole 18 in 3 strokes, and both had really good tee shots. Owen was the first to make her approach, and she parked her disc right underneath the basket, putting all of the pressure on Holyn Handley. Holyn would throw her forehand pretty well, but it would hit the logs surrounding the green, and it would have the worst reaction ever, rolling away to 45 feet. Holyn had to make that putt to keep her tournament hopes alive.
Oh, yes.
The emotion, the excitement, what a moment. But the tournament was not done there. Now they would head into a sudden death playoff. The playoff would start on hole 16, which favored Holyn because of the distance. Both ladies once again had great drives, but Owen Scoggins would clip a tree on her approach shot and be left with an obstructed circle 2 putt. Holyn now had the chance to flip the pressure onto Owen as she was able to put her approach into the circle. Owen would be unable to make the putt, and Holyn Handley would make her tester to clinch her first ever Elite Series win, and what a way to get that first win in such dramatic fashion. Next up is the Preserve in Minnesota. Holyn Handley and Missy Gannon would battle at the top all 3 rounds. In the final day, with Missy up by 2, there were tons of back and forth between these two. Holyn would actually take the lead at one point in the round, but on hole 14, things would take a turn for Holyn. She would card a bogey while Missy scored a birdie, taking back the lead. Then on hole 15, Holyn would hit the Mando tree right off the tee. This would result in a double bogey. Then on 17, Missy, with a 3-stroke lead, would miss the gap and kick out of bounds. Now with the door open for Holyn, she would step up and she would too miss her line. Lucky for her, she did not kick OB, but she was still only able to gain 1 stroke with a par. On hole 18, Holyn Handley went first, and she tried to take a really aggressive route across the water, trying to get as far up the fairway as possible. She would be unable to clear the OB, taking her out of contention. Missy would coast to the finish line again, getting her 3rd win on the year, which was now setting up to be one of her best seasons ever. Now the tour was off to Des Moines. Owen Scoggins would look strong, taking 3 strokes into the final day over Natalie Ryan and Holyn Handley, and rookie Eliezer Mittling would round out your lead card 4 back. On Championship Sunday, we did not expect that the other rookie in the field, Emily Weatherman, would be Owen's biggest threat. Emily would be off to a bogey-free 3 under start, which in the moment was pretty impressive, but we still weren't sure she was going to be able to close the gap. Owen Scoggins on the lead card would have a slow start, and unfortunately would have some key missed putts that held her back. Eventually, Natalie and Emily would be tied for the lead in the middle of the round. Emily Weatherman, though, would continue her push all the way to the finish, going bogey-free 8 under to close out her round, including clutch birdies on hole 17 and hole 18. With Ryan and Scoggins taking late bogeys, Weatherman would have some breathing room with the solo lead in the clubhouse. Natalie Ryan, who had a chance to eagle to potentially force a playoff with Emily Weatherman, threw out of bounds, securing the win for Weatherman. This would be her first win on the Pro Tour, and most importantly, during her rookie season. At this point in the season, we had started to hear her name, but this time she really proved that she could be a force in the division. Now, fellow rookie Ellie Ezra Mittling would quietly put together a solid final round, finishing in second, meaning both rookies would hold the top 2 spots in the Des Moines Challenge. Okay, we're ready to head across the pond for the European Open, but before we do that, let's talk about the winners of the 5 elite European events. First, the Copenhagen Open had one of the wildest finishes of the year, as Evelina Salonen would make up a 9-stroke deficit to tie Kaidi Alsalu and force a playoff with a crazy circle 2 putt. Evelina then would hit another clutch putt in the playoff and secure a win. The Turku Open and the Swedish Open were won by Silva Saarinen, who also happened to win 3 other DGBT Europe silver events in the same month. Kristen Tatar would make her return to competition with a win at Krokol Open, and finally Missy Gannon would take down the European Disc Golf Festival in a dramatic playoff with Evelina Salonen. Alright, now let's discuss the European Open. With the European field being so strong this year, and with this being one of their most desired events to win, we knew the action was going to be incredible. But we did not expect the way the drama went down. Now, European Open added a new course for this year's event, the Monster at Tampere Disc Golf Center. This wooded track would prove to be tough, and it really allowed players like Kristen Tatar and Evelina Salonen to separate from the field. After 2 rounds at the Monster, Kristen Tatar had the lead at 10 under, and Evelina Salonen trailing right behind her at 9 under. The next closest competitor was Silva Saarinen at 1 under. The third round, being the first round at the Beast in Nokia, had us shell-shocked as Kristen Tatar kept missing her lines. You could feel the frustration as she was racking up so many over par strokes and not really carding any birdies. She would eventually shoot 8 over, which had to be one of her worst rounds at a major ever, or at least in several years. The gap she had over the field was virtually gone. Evelina Salonen didn't have the most impressive round herself, but was able to counter her bogeys with birdies, shooting an even round. And then it was Silva Saarinen, who looked to be too far back, who was able to take advantage of the leader's struggles and shoot 5 under, putting her within 3 of Evelina. On the final day, it was unfortunately Evelina's turn to experience those same struggles that Kristen saw in round 3. Evelina could not find a birdie to save her life. It wasn't before long that Silva had already caught up to her and taken the lead. Simultaneously, Kristen Tatar started to put things together mid-round, and after being 7 back, eventually would be charging for the lead as well. Now it was a 3-way battle at the top, but quickly Evelina would fall behind as she would catch bogeys on 11 and a double bogey on hole 13. Then it was Silva who struggled, taking a double bogey on 12, allowing Kristen to come back and take the outright lead. On the infamous hole 16, Silva would be trailing Kristen by 1, Evelina back 2. Now hole 16 has been the site of many historic collapses. Evelina was the first to attempt to make the island, and she would come up short. Silva would park her approach under the basket, and Kristen would answer, throwing a shot even closer, setting them both up for birdies. Evelina would try to make her drop zone putt to save the par, but would bounce off the top of the basket and settle on the hay barrels, which was out of bounds. She then would miss the short comeback putt and take a triple bogey. She would eventually shoot a 9 over final round, completely erasing her lead and falling back to 4th. So now it was a battle between Kristen and Silva. On the final hole, Silva was still trailing by 1. Kristen would throw first and put her drive barely in bounds. Silva stepped up and overturned her drive into the OB early. This meant that Kristen could play for par, and she would be able to go on and complete one of the greatest comebacks in FPO history and get another major win at the European Open. Kristen was back, and she was finally able to get her first major of this season. Silva was able to finish second, and Missy Gannon would be the one to surge and take the final podium spot. Back in the US, we had the Ledgestone Open in Peoria. Because Champions Cup was at Northwood this year, they decided to remove it from the Ledgestone schedule and play 4 rounds at Sunset Hills. This completely changed the complexity of the tournament, as Sunset Hills is pretty much a easier wide open course. Holland Hanley was able to take full advantage of it. After taking the lead in round 2, she was able to shoot amazing round after amazing round and take the victory by 7 strokes over Lisa Fakis and Haley King. At the LWS Open at Idlewild, we had a similar performance from Ohn Scoggins. She would have the lead after 2 rounds, and then she would take off in the final day going 8 under through 13, eventually taking home her 2nd trophy of the season. And funny enough, this is the first time that Ohn Scoggins has won multiple Elite Series in the same year, again proving that she is just getting better and better. Next, we would head to the World Championships. This year, Worlds would be played in Lynchburg, Virginia, at the technical New London course and Ivy Hill, a long distance friendly course. Round 1 kicked off at New London with a scorcher of a round from Holland Hanley, shooting 10 under. Her round included an astounding 2 eagles. Kat Mertsch also played well, shooting 7 under. The rest of the top 10 hovered around that 4 under mark. This top 10 consisted of names such as Missy Gannon, Paige Pierce, Silva Saarinen, and Evelina Salonen. Not included was Ohn Scoggins, who was back in 17th at even, and the tournament favorite Kristen Tatar was back at 1 over in 21st place. Both women needing to work hard to get back into the mix. In round 2, Evelina Salonen made a move to the top, tying the hot round for the day at 5 under, putting her 3 back of Holland Hanley. Round 3, Evelina would shoot another hot round to catch up to Holland, and this battle between Holland and Evelina really allowed them to separate from the field. They were able to distance themselves by 7 strokes between them and Kat Mertsch. Kristen Tatar would shoot a respectable 5 under in the 3rd round and would move into 6th place. However, she would already be 12 strokes behind with just 2 rounds to play. Round 4, the leaders would hit a speed bump as they would take multiple birdies, but they would erase them with multiple over par strokes. In the end, Holland would gain a 1-stroke advantage over Evelina for the final round. The slow play from the leaders allowed Kat Mertsch to make up ground. She would just be 5 back of Holland, and Kristen Tatar would shoot a hot round, getting her within 9 of the leaders. With a wild comeback that she made at European Open, no one was counting her out at this point. The final day was here, and it was a wild one in good and bad ways. The leaders were experiencing some all-time nerves, and neither of the 4 lead card members had ever won a world championship before. These jitters really showed in the front 9, with Holland going 1 over and Evelina going 2 over. Kat Mertsch, on the other hand, starting with a decent deficit, played like she had nothing to lose, and it worked for her. She was able to put herself in the conversation, going 5 under through 10. Now, you would think with the leaders struggling, Kristen Tatar would have taken advantage, and early she did go 3 for 3 to start, but after that she would card pars and bogeys and would be back to even for the day by hole 13. This really ended Kristen's hopes for winning a 3rd world title. By hole 12, everyone was focused on Kat and Holland, who were tied at 19 under. Evelina at this time was 3 back, and it almost seemed like she was out of the picture. But on hole 13, she was able to regain momentum with a clutch C1X putt for birdie. She would gain 1 on Mertsch and 2 on Holland, who scored a bogey. Hole 14 had a lot of talk coming into the week, with a green that almost promoted devastating rollaways with its rocky, steep grade. Holland Hanley would be the unfortunate victim of hole 14, as her approach to the green was thrown short of the inbounds. This made her have to throw another tricky approach. This one would have too much speed and eventually catch the edge, and, well,
There it goes.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh.
she eventually took a triple bogey on this hole. Evelina had a very sketchy approach herself to the basket, but it caught the steps as it started to kind of roll away, and this allowed her to stay within 15 feet of the basket. She would then make that clutch putt for birdie, putting her just 1 back of Mertsch, who had a great putt of her own to save par on the same hole. On hole 15, Kat Mertsch would struggle carding a bogey, while Evelina took a birdie and got the outright lead. Kat Mertsch unfortunately would bogey the next 2 holes, which really allowed Evelina to get some distance by just getting par. On hole 18, Evelina was up by 3 strokes, and she was able to play safe and walk in the victory, earning her first ever world title. Holland Hanley, on the other hand, had a tough pill to swallow. After 2 wins this year, you felt like she had moved past some of her issues closing out tournaments, but once again, she would have a terrible final round, shooting 8 over. After the high of Worlds, the tour would head to Michigan for the Great Lakes Open. Kat Mertsch immediately carried over her energy from Worlds and would have the lead halfway through the event after shooting a 10 under second round, but right behind her was Kristin Tattar and Ohn Scoggins. In round 3, Kat would begin to run away with the tournament as she would be up by 4 strokes heading into hole 8. The wind was really swirling that day, and Kat Mertsch had a circle 2 putt on a hill into a headwind for par. Now, there was a big debate on whether she should lay this up, but she decided to go for it, and she would get a bad reaction off of her putt, and it would roll away down the hill into the OB. This would lead her to take a triple bogey, immediately erasing the lead she had. This changed the state of the race as Kristin Tattar would now be tied for the lead. Now, we haven't mentioned her yet because she wasn't near the top after 2, but coverage started to show shots from Holyn Handley on the 3rd card. She would put together her own 10 under performance and go from out of contention to solo leader by the end of the round. Many question how she would be able to handle having the lead again on the final day with Worlds fresh on everyone's mind, but Holyn seemed like she wanted vengeance, and it showed. She only started the day with 1 stroke over Kristin. Kristin, however, would give the momentum to Holyn on hole 1 after she had a uncharacteristic forehand shank into the OB early. This would lead to a double bogey. After a bounce back birdie on hole 2, she would get another double bogey on hole 3. This was all the confidence that Holyn needed. She would shoot a clean 8 under through 16, and she would leave the rest of the FPO field in the dust, taking down the Great Lakes Open in convincing fashion. Now we have the first playoff tournament of the season, which is the Green Mountain Championships on the beautiful Smuggler's Notch property in Vermont, the courses that Kristin Tattar won the World Championships on last year. And you can tell she really likes these courses as she would hold the lead through rounds 1 and 2. In round 3, however, Kristin would be on the struggle bus. You could see by her reactions she was just having a very frustrating day. All of a sudden, Ohn Scoggins and Silva Saarinen were in the lead 1 stroke ahead of Kristin Tattar and Missy Gannon. This was a dream final round lead card with the FPO's best battling it out. In the first 7 holes, Ohn and Silva were able to widen their gap between Missy and Kristin Tattar by 5. But then Silva started to turn it up even more with birdie after birdie after birdie. She would eventually distance herself 4 ahead of Ohn going into hole 14. But Silva's run would come to a screeching halt on 15 when she yanked her drive into the first available tree. She would limit the damage to just a single birdie, but you could tell her confidence was rattled. She would go on to bogey 16 as well with a short missed putt. One of the reasons her confidence might have been shook was due to the fact that Kristin Tattar was making a late push. On the tee of hole 18, Kristin would close the gap to within 2 of Silva. Now, 18 can be sort of a tough drive to keep in bounds, especially when you have the pressure of holding a lead. Kristin would throw a great drive to start and be in bounds. Silva would step up and she would find the OB on the left side. This wasn't the worst case scenario though, because she was able to get enough progress down the fairway to be able to put an approach near the basket for par, which is all she needed to secure the win. Silva would throw her approach just outside the circle. Kristin would answer with her second shot making it into the bullseye. This meant that Silva could win the tournament with this putt from circle 2, and she would hit high chains and splash out. This meant that we were going to another playoff this season. In the sudden death playoff, they would go to hole 18 again, which was kind of in Kristin's favor since she had just birdied that hole and Silva had just bogeyed. This time, both ladies would land in bounds. Kristin would be the one to throw her approach first, and she would land within 20 feet of the basket. Silva would step up and throw her approach short of the circle. With another circle 2 putt on 18, this time to stay alive, Silva would clank off the cage and roll away, giving Kristin the instant victory. Kristin would have another huge comeback win on her resume this season, as she was able to battle back from 6 strokes down. Silva would suffer a devastating loss, and you could just see the emotion overcome her at the end of this playoff. Although she let this one slip away, there were signs throughout this weekend, and honestly throughout the season, that she's going to be a real force in the FPO division. Now we move on to MVP Open, which is one of the most iconic DGPT events. Again, Kristin Tattar would have the lead midway through the tournament, but the second half would be the reverse of what happened at Green Mountain. This time, Kristin would hold on to a 3-stroke lead over Missy Gannon and a 4-stroke lead over Ohn going into the final round. On the final day, Kristin was not getting enough birdies, and she was losing ground to Missy and Ohn, eventually giving up the lead to Missy Gannon, who went 5 under through the front 9. While this was happening on the lead card, Paige Pierce was going off on the chase card, posting a 7 under round score by hole 14. At one point, it looked like Paige could steal this victory as she was just one behind Missy. Paige's run, however, would be cut short on 17. She would have a birdie look, but completely miss the putt down the hill, and would have a long comeback for par that she would miss as well, ending her chances at winning the title. Now it was time for Kristen's turn to make some noise. Finally, she was able to get some birdies and take advantage of a bogey by Missy on hole 14. This allowed her to take back the lead by 2. Kristen would hold on to this lead until hole 17 when Missy Gannon would step up and hit one of the clutchest death putts of the year. This would get her a crucial birdie. Kristen would have to step up and hit a 25-footer for par, and she wasn't able to connect, meaning that we were all tied up for the final hole. Missy and Kristen would both throw decent drives and both have good enough layups to where they should be able to make the green with ease and each get a par. Kristen would be the first to try to throw her shot on the island. This was a chip forehand shot, which is honestly Kristen's bread and butter. A shot you would expect her to execute 90% of the time. But in this moment, she would saw it off a bit and hit a tree, keeping her out of bounds. This would open the door for Missy, who would go for the same chip forehand, except this is not a shot that we see Missy break out often. However, she was able to throw it perfectly onto the green, and this would allow her to become champion of the MVP Open.
Gannon wins it.
Not only was she able to get the W, but she also became your regular season points champion, passing up Holland Hanley. As we close out the season, we head to Throw Pink, which is classified as a PDGA A tier, but is played on the same weekend and on the same course as the MPO United States Championship. So although on paper this isn't a big tournament, the Throw Pink Championship is treated with the same hype and respect as a major. Evelina Salonen, who was pretty quiet after her Worlds victory, rose to the occasion again, taking the lead in round 1 and maintaining it through round 2 with a total score of 10 under. Lurking right behind her was Owen Scoggins at 8 under. Then we had Kristen at 7 under, making things exciting for the second half of the tournament. In the third round, it was all Kristen as she was able to go 8 under, taking a 2-stroke lead over Evelina. In the final round, Kristen, not planning to make this one close at all, went 9 under through the first 13 holes, and she was able to build a big enough gap to where she had no pressure in the final holes. And Kristen Tatar would go on to win the Throw Pink Championship, closing out the regular season on top. Owen Scoggins would be your runner-up, and Evelina would have to settle for 3rd place. Paige Pierce would shoot another incredible final round, going 11 under. Unfortunately, she was just way too far back to take the win, but I think this is the confidence that Paige needs going into the offseason, and hopefully by 2025, she is back toward the top. Finally, we had the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. This format was changed again this year, where we would have a full 4-round tournament with stroke advantages awarded to the top points finishers. For example, Missy Gannon, the points champion, would start out at 10 under, Holland Hanley would start out at 9 under, Kristen Tatar at 8 under, and Owen Scoggins at 7 under. Once again, the most consistent trio of FPO players with their stroke advantages would dominate the leaderboard. Kristen would take the lead after the first 2 rounds. However, Missy and Owen would be right there, with Missy tying Kristen and Owen surpassing her to take a 1-stroke lead. As we headed into the final day of the Disc Golf Pro Tour season, we had so much hype for this lead card battle, and it certainly was epic, with multiple lead changes and tons of amazing throws and clutch putts. Missy Gannon was eventually the one to break the tie, eventually building a 3-stroke lead into the final hole. She was able to play for par and take home her 3rd Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, holding up her nickname Big Money Missy. There would be a wild battle for second as Owen Scoggins and Kristen, who were tied, both had to throw approaches for birdie on hole 18. Kristen left her short of the circle, and Owen would completely shank her shot to the right and towards the OB, but she would get the luckiest kick of the year, not only saving her disc from out of bounds, but launching her to about 20 feet of the basket. This was an unforgettable moment, and it couldn't happen to a better person. This meant that Kristen had to hit a long putt just to stay tied. With a lot of money on the line, she was able to drain it, capping off an incredible FPO season. As you saw in this video, there was so much action from the FPO in 2024. One could still argue that Kristen Tatar was still the #1 player this year, but there was much more parity than last year. With a chase card win by a rookie and 5 first-time Elite Series winners, I personally believe this was the most exciting FPO season ever, and I am really looking forward to see what's in store for 2025. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on the 2024 FPO season and who you thought had the best season overall. Next up, I will be ranking the top 10 MPO players from 2024, so make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss that upload. And if you enjoyed this recap of the FPO season, go ahead and check out my recap of the MPO season in the video link on the screen. I'm Kalahale, thanks for watching, and have a good one.